Hey everyone, we're back. Part two here with Sterre. Very excited. Some interesting things coming up on the part one. Um, but we do feel like we wanted to get a little bit more of some background knowledge of Sterre and who he is. And as Joey said, it just a bit of a nicer conversation, talking through some good things. Um, so before we could jump back into the weeds and all the things, one of the things that I'm interested in is radical honesty. We didn't get a chance to get into this with Kristina, just kind of briefly, but I'd be curious to hear how you would summarize the ideology and what it is, and maybe how to be a practitioner of radical honesty.
Yeah, good question. And I'm already noticing that I want to do a good job at explaining this because it's quite a substantial influence on my life. So I want to convey the full extent and the most perfect version of the thoughts of radical honesty that there is. Um, yeah, like I read the book. I'm just gonna go do a little bit of my own how I got into contact with it and
Mm,
hopefully explain some of the details along the way, hopefully.
love.
There's a book called Radical Honesty, and it's written by Brad Blanton, an American psychologist, psychotherapist. Um, and he is about 84 by now, so it was written a while ago, and it's still the book is still on so many lists of influential books to read, kind of. I've seen it kind of pop up again and again. So I thought I'd give it a shot, and it really resonated with me. And I think it was maybe a year and 3 months ago.
Mm. Oh, so
Um,
fairly recent in your
Fairly
journey.
recent, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for
Mm,
sure. Um, and yeah, along the way, while reading the book, I noticed some parts that really resonated with me, and I'm like, oh well, this is something, for instance, I'm really bad at, and this is like a core thing, a core practice of radical honesty. So just by the merit of that thing, it would be great to do more of it. And along the way, I found more and more of those things like, oh, this is also really valuable. Oh, this is also really valuable.
mm,
So by the end of the book, I'm like, yeah, this is great. Um, but how do I actually? I felt like an island because it's like the it's a it's a it's a thing you need to practice. Like it is properly a practice.
mm,
Um, so I felt very far from actually applying. I'm quite familiar with applying things I learned, but in this case, I'm like, how do I even start with this? And it turns out there are a bunch of workshops actually.
mm,
It turns out there are more people that had the same predicament and they
mm.
started some workshops. I attended those, and yeah, I went pretty deep into that. Like a weekend workshop and another weekend workshop, and like spent 3 days together with a group of people and try try radical honesty. And then finally, I've been kind of not saying what it actually is, and kind of
I know.
postponing and postponing and postponing. But finally, we
Please,
are here.
please take us there.
Yes. Um, yeah, it's one of the core ideas is that you express your thoughts and emotions in the moment they are actually happening, and don't hold back.
Mm,
And not because it's of some kind of moral imperative, it should be doing this. No, it is actually for your own sake.
mm,
Uh, because I think radicality shows quite neatly that not doing that is a prime source of many of our sufferings, both personal and kind of suffering. So that's where the honesty part comes in, because expressing your thoughts and emotions, well, many people express their thoughts and emotions, true, but they also withhold a lot of them, and a lot of big ones and a lot of relevant ones to the other person. And the idea is, if you do that and withhold them, then it's basically, I think there's like a Buddhist proverb is like, hating someone is drinking poison and hoping for the other person to die.
Hmm.
And that's pretty much how radical honesty sees the withholding. Like, you are sitting on your resentments towards someone else, and it's clouding and influencing your relationship in the broader sense with the person. It basically becomes a lens through which you see the other person, and there's more and more distance between you and the other person. Yeah, I think that's one of the core things. And one of the things that kind of set me off is like, historically I've been really bad at talking about myself. Like, I can have any conversation with any person, but I will rarely, kind of feel the need or get the idea of to talk about something about myself or about my life.
Hmm.
And that used to be worse, so it's getting better. But this is very close to the radical honesty, like the withholding thing. It means you don't show yourself, you're not vulnerable, people don't really know who you are, and on the flip side, you are also not properly expressing what's going on for you,
Hmm.
and in regards to the other person. So yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it ticks a lot of boxes for me, and I'm definitely not the most um, perfect practitioner. I like kind of talking off the cuff, and there's a lot of language involved in radical honesty, and a change of language to make sure to keep it real and to keep it factual. And the language is kind of cumbersome. So I'm not a perfect practitioner in that sense.
Hmm.
I'm hoping for some questions, actually, because I'm curious how well of a job I did explaining this. Like, are you kind of following what's going on?
Yeah, what I've heard you say is that radical honesty is about being radically honest.
Honest. Good point. Next. All right. Good. Now this wrapped up. Next. No, but for real though.
Your explanation there of expressing thoughts and emotions when they happen, as opposed to the self-censorship that we can so easily fall into.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I'm wondering in that is, do you ever have that moment that you're like, I'm gonna now be radical honest with someone, express my feelings and my thoughts in this moment, but that you also, do you still feel that need to hold back? Because there can be moments that I can be radical honest, and when I'm radically honest, ooh, that's a moment that most people are like, I'm gonna step back from this guy forever because he just insulted my whole life. Do you still have that moment that you're like, oh, I want to say this, but I shouldn't?
Yeah. Yeah. There's two things actually. Like, yeah. I mean, all the time. Like, it can be something embarrassing, either embarrassing to the other person or to me. It can be that I'm angry and I don't like to be angry, or I can worry that the other person will be angry, and then I definitely feel like definitely holding back for sure. That's always there, and the whole reason why just reading the book doesn't work is you need, or doesn't work for me, is you need actual practice to go through those barriers and see that nothing, like, the world doesn't explode, I've survived many uncomfortable situations, and it kind of is a muscle you build as well. And the other thing is, another core part of radical honesty is to keep it personal and personal to me, in the sense like, this kind of set me off by saying insulting someone's life. Like, the radical honesty practitioners are very adamant about the following, meaning that the thing they resent about someone else or their life or their choices or whatever they said, it's about me. I I'm making myself angry about this, and I have a story that it means this and this and this and this, and I've just used through 2 or 3 key phrasings in the, because the language is kind of odd. Usually people don't say I make myself angry, but that's the radical honesty language. If you really get down to it, there is a large component that's actually true, and it's very easy to say you make me angry, or I am angry, and like making it some kind of thing that happens in the world out there. But to take radical responsibility for your own emotions, and then the situation like you described, Joey, like insulting someone else, it doesn't become insulting someone. Someone can still be insulted. That's a different case. But it's not like, for instance, I can say to you, Joey, like, I make myself angry about what you just said. I'm not for real, but I make myself angry about what you just said. And I have a story that you are disrespectful to me. And then making it very clear that this is my story about the real event that just happened. I don't know what went on in your head. I don't know what you actually meant. I'm making an educated guess all the time, but I still should take responsibility for the fact that I don't know for sure what it is that you actually mean. And in my practice and in all the workshops, every fucking time, it turns out someone meant something completely different. And it's every time it is a trigger that I have. And it's totally not what they meant. And even if they meant it, I can still choose to not be affected by it. And if I am affected by it, it is something that I do to myself. So yeah, I'm very glad you asked these questions, because these are, I think I kind of, these 2 major islands of major tenets of radical honesty. I think we've now discussed like the radical responsibility and expressing what you want and expressing what's going on for you.
Yeah, because it's been a very interesting personal discussion within my friend group, is because there's certain moments that people are like, that people come to me to, let's not call it complaining, but to talk about another friend, and that I specifically tell them to talk with that friend about it. Like, hey, I noticed that you are having this problem, it's irritating you, and therefore you're venting towards me. But you're but you need to talk to your friend.
The radical honesty practitioners would be totally on board with it. Like, gossiping and like this complaining is a very clear signal that there's something bothering there.
Yeah, but the counterpoint that she gives is that sometimes a friendship is worth more than being that type of honest. And it's very interesting, because at one side I'm like, yes, because I recognize those moments as well, because sometimes it's an irritation that I have about something that is something that hits me but not them personally, even though she puts it on me. But at other times, like this specific example, yeah, you should totally talk with your friend, because if you look online, it's technically some sort of a toxic behavior sometimes.
And even if it's not, but yeah, it's interesting, like this phrasing, like my friendship is worth more, or is worth a lot, or my relationship is worth a lot, and I don't want to damage it. This is making a huge assumption that this talk will blow up and do irreparable damage. And in fact, the opposite is usually true.
Hmm.
In so many, both in the conversations I've had directly with radical honest people, and the and my own friends who I've talked to, but also like the stories that other people tell. For instance, a conversation they had with their parents that they knew for sure would blow up and go straight out the window and do irreparable damage, and they were sure they were already prepared to never talk to their parents again, and it totally didn't happen. It totally didn't happen. And this happens again and again and again. And we make major assumptions and untested assumptions about how other people will react, and we basically don't even give them the chance to react. We're stealing away their agency by already deciding for them that they are too angry or too whatever to handle it. We're even doing them a disservice to not even give them a chance to have their real reaction, and already making up a story how it will be.
Oh man, I feel called out because because I am totally the same when it comes to certain topics and certain conversations. Like I'm 100% sure that someone is doing something because of a certain reason, and instead of talking towards this person like, "Hey, can we fix this, or can we do something about this, or what is the actual reason?" I'm like, I'm just gonna let it go, and just don't talk about it, even though it's bothering me. No, I totally recognize that.
This is super common. Like, you are in the vast majority, and I'm no different. I'm not now some perfect Buddhist monk, radical honesty Zen master or some shit. And hell no. I'm also part of the majority, but it's good to be aware that it happens, and the practice is to break that cycle basically, and give you countless counter examples of that not happening, and actually deepening a relationship. And for sure, it will be not smooth. It won't be smooth sailing from the get-go. There will be emotions. There will be anger in some cases, but you also express this anger, and that's how you get over your anger. And not by taking the poison yourself and shooting it back at yourself or at your spouse. How stereotypical is the conversation: being angry at work, coming home angry, taking it out on your significant other and or your son or your children, or and it's almost too stereotypical, but it happens a lot.
Yeah. Dang, that's good. Yeah, I can totally relate. Oh man, I've heard it said that like anger is a secondary emotion, and underneath it is the thing that needs to be addressed. And for me, it's embarrassment. If I feel embarrassed, I want to protect myself, and I use anger, not consciously, but it's what happens. And yeah. So I've really, especially with Brianna, my spouse, like, and it's really humbling, but coming to that moment where it's like, I'm feeling embarrassed. Like that's why I'm having this reaction. When you said this, it made me feel this way. And did you mean it that way? Or even just acknowledging, I think I misunderstood what you intended there. And it clicked into my story. So
we're filled to the brim with these kinds of defense mechanisms, and like automated kind of, oh, you made me feel like this, so I will either strike back or be the opposite, like clam down and be passive aggressive. We're filled to the brim with this kind of mechanics. And this is a great way to kind of um, bring it into the open. And that's another core tenet of radical honesty. Bring it all into the open. No matter how ugly or weird or whatever, bring it into the open, and you'll see it kind of already gets kind of tuned down. Like if I'm embarrassed and I say I'm embarrassed, if I'm afraid and I actually say that I'm afraid, it already at least takes the edge off for sure. And it makes me, and it has like a whole host of added benefits of making me seem more human to the other person. And yeah, it's only good stuff if you bring things into the open. And I'm pretty much, historically I've been pretty much the opposite. Like I've been told I'm very hard to read. I'm not very I can be a bit, my face tends to be pretty serious at the best of days. And when I'm, and I mentioned when I'm either angry, it gets even more serious, or a little bit embarrassed, it gets even more serious. So yeah, it's, for me, it's been great to bring all kinds of things into the open, and help them. Take the edge off for sure.
I feel like that's a Dutch thing also. We have stern faces, like stone cold, like
maybe, yeah.
we're going for it. Like I'm angry all the time. No,
Yes.
but I recognize that as well in previous conversations. Like once a thought is so strong that you're like 100% sure that someone's going to react that way, you will not bring it up. Like a conversation we had with Douglas about his sexuality, like there's some point in the conversation that you're 100% sure because it has proven before that it happens that way. And I recognize that for myself as well, is that I am avoiding a very hard conversation with a friend because I am 100% sure that it will explode if I bring it up, because the moment because you've seen with this, because I've seen with this friend that it happened before that it exploded, and now I'm holding back. So I feel like there's still there will always be a human part in there that people will hold back for a specific reason.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't know the future. I don't know the future. It might be different this time. It might be the same. But you should give someone, you should at least give them the chance and not already decide for them, I would say.
Yeah, and Joey probably even goes back to what you were talking about initially with the you said something like the moments where you're radically honest, it comes out forcibly, or people have like, oh, don't want this reaction or something. But part of me wonders if the bottling and that reaction are linked, like the holding back creates more forcible.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's forcible. It's more that I have no natural filter. So if something pops in my mind, there's a high probability it pops out. Even if I'm by myself, I talk to myself 100 times over. I never shut up, which is a problem.
No, it's awesome. But I love that.
But at the same time, like, so an example I gave in the episode with Douglas's episode as well is that I called someone gay that wasn't gay, which is very offensive. The people don't like that. So I learned how to control those thoughts. But yeah, it definitely bottles up if you bottle something up. But I don't try to offend people. It's not in my nature, but it happens. I noticed that when talking to both Sterre and with you, Scott, is that I try to watch my language a little bit better, because I am a sailor when it comes to my mouth. I talk so much swear words within a minute that sometimes even God's like, hey, okay, can you calm down? Just a finger comes down from the sky like, no, you should stop this. But it makes it very interesting because I become a filtered version of myself, even though I don't really necessarily want to. And with radical honesty, you try to, what I gather is to try to avoid that a little bit, or totally jump in and be the unfiltered version of yourself by not holding back anything. I really do like that, but at the same time, what I'm saying is...
With the big add-on, while also taking responsibility. you can't just be going around kicking and screaming without saying, oh, this is actually me kicking and screaming because of these and these reasons. You do still need to take full responsibility without filtering yourself. It's an interesting balance, and it's a tricky one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it made it very interesting these couple of months, especially during the Corona times, how to deal with that. Because the only option you have right now is to read text or do a video call like this, but read text through either WhatsApp or Facebook messages or whatever, and interpret that your way. You can't see facial expressions. You do not know how the person on the other side is actually feeling until you either give him a call or ask about it. So, in a sense, everyone has been practicing radical honesty in a bit. Because they have to anticipate the other people's feelings and their own feelings a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great analogy. Everybody's familiar with how dumped down and kind of mechanic and unemotional text is, and how much filling in you have to do. Everybody's aware of this discrepancy. And the radical honesty people would point to the fact that there's another layer. There's the extra layer. The normal layer also has this same mechanic where it goes from the head of the one person through reading of expressions for the other person. That's another layer of where there's interference, and we don't take into account that interference. And the radical honesty people try to account for that interference, to know that interference is there, and to be very careful in making assumptions based on potential interference. Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm laughing because this is literally my class right now. I'm doing communications, literally the class communications, and it's all about sending messages and static. Why some people interpret things differently. So it's kind of funny that we're talking about this.
Yeah, I think it's just a vastly important topic and practice. The glimpses I've gotten from lingo that maybe Kristina's used or you, Sterre, have used has really been fascinating. Things like I appreciate you for fill in the blank. I make myself, or I find myself feeling, probably more make. And then just Kristina within our improv group had this beautiful moment of honesty where she just was talking about kind of self-consciousness and put it out to the group, and like it just allowed everyone space to then also process the fear they were having or the jealousy that they were experiencing. And it's like, this is super important, and it takes that one person going first, but not in like a, you guys are making me feel like I'm not included, but she just, it was the responsibility. She's like, I'm having these feelings and I want to express it to you guys. And oh man, I just like, that's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another reason why conversations don't nearly as often explode as you think, because of exactly this mechanic. It's very disarming and very human to see someone make the first step in being vulnerable, and it just invites more vulnerability. And all the things we imagined, all the scenarios we think that how it might explode, are kind of disarmed literally disarmed by doing that. And that's a very powerful way. Yeah.
So then I wonder, one of the things that we had talked about, Sterre, is some thoughts you'd had on previous episodes, or so I don't know if this could be like a feedback / practicum on radical honesty, but I do want to hear your feedback, and I'm also kind of curious, like, how would you either deliver it from a radical honesty perspective, or how would you encourage us to receive it from a radical honesty perspective? There might be too many layers on layers, but
yeah, fair enough. I think some of the things, some of my pet peeves I've discussed in the previous one
episode. Yeah,
in the previous episode were for sure had to do with the things that triggered me in the in the previous episodes that were definitely based on that. And the and that's not so much of feedback on the episode on the podcast itself, but it's much more like things that trigger me. And yeah, I have this thing where I want consistency. I want the reasoning to be consistent, and I have a story that I have a great radar to single this out, and I can't stand inconsistency in reasoning. I think, and I don't like to be inconsistent myself, and I project on others that they should want to be consistent and theoretically sound and all that stuff.